Welcome to episode 13 of the Plant-Based Diet Benefits Podcast. I am your host, Trent Lindsay, a certified mastering raw food nutrition educator and studying to become a health coach through the Institute for Integrative Nutrition as well. More on that later, but today I am super excited to bring to you our first Q&A episode. We have a question from a member of our Patreon community related to parenting and raising kids on a plant-based diet, which is something that is very near and dear to me. But I do want to caveat one little bit for you guys today. At the time of this recording, I'm recording on a Friday evening, and this is episode number 13. I'm kind of hoping that there's no bad voodoo stuff going on and that you guys enjoy this episode. But without further ado, let's start this show. Alright guys, I'm super excited. A member of our Patreon community asked me this question directly, and I'm pumped to answer it. It's something that is very important to me as a parent. It's something that I've put a lot of thought into, and I completely understand where this question is coming from. It can be really difficult to kind of gain perspective as you are learning how to change your own diet, nonetheless those of kids. And I'm super excited to provide at least my thoughts on this topic. But before I ramble on too much, let's go ahead and read off this community member's question. She says, I need help getting my toddler, who is almost 4, on board with the veggies and starches. Ideas on that, as well as any recommendations for guidelines on protein, etc., would be so helpful. I also need approaches on how to actually word it, because no matter how I sell it, she isn't biting, so to speak. Which I absolutely love that pun, by the way. Are there any professionals out there who can give insight on how to do this without fighting tooth and nail? I don't want food and the discussion surrounding it to be a negative experience, as I know firsthand how emotions can be wrapped up in eating. Wondering if there's an approach that has been successful. She also goes on to ask about some other topics, which we can discuss in another podcast episode down the road. But then she went on to say that I just can't get enough of your show. I'm so glad I found you. I learn something new every time, and it has really helped to surround and immerse myself into this world while at the beginning of my journey. I'm currently 3 weeks in and noticing many benefits already. That is awesome. I'm super excited that you've been able to find my show, and 3 weeks into your plant-based diet journey, you're already experiencing some benefits and are encouraged and wanting to learn more, which is super, super cool. I remember I was very much in that boat when I first went plant-based, and honestly, I really haven't stopped learning about this diet. It's something I really enjoy learning about, and am now very passionate about educating others to, at least give it a try and incorporate some more veggies into their diet. So let me first start off by, saying that many parents can be asking this kind of same question, really. It doesn't have to be that you are plant-based. A lot of kids have picky eating type of symptoms, so to speak, it's just a kind of a part of kids being raised, right? I don't think there's any parent-kid relationship where this can be an issue, but it definitely is elevated to some degree when you are, quote, limiting your options by having a plant-based diet. But I think you'll find out that it really opens up a whole new world of possibilities in terms of what they could be eating. So at first, it seems a little difficult, but over time it does get better. I also want to say that in this episode, I'm going to talk about what my wife, Mary, and I have done with raising our kids. But just like any other parenting topics, there's a lot of variance or a lot of different ways to accomplish a similar outcome. So although I may approach this one way, there's other parents who have approached it a different way and still had success. So take it with a grain of salt, but remember that there's many ways to parent, and this is just my own personal experience, and I'm hoping that it helps out for you. One of the first things that I want to tell you is to remember to be patient with your child as you help them transition to a plant-based diet. First and foremost, I think it's important to admit that it's all new to you as well, right? Like when you first decided to go plant-based, you likely didn't realize the harm you were having on the planet and animals before eating a plant-based diet. You likely didn't know that there was an healthier alternative out there, and you were just introduced to this concept and wanted to give it a try, and you may be very excited about it because you're the one that made that decision, but your child is kind of just along for the ride, and you have to really give them time to adjust to that change. And I wouldn't put a timeline on it. Kids are kids. They go through a lot of phases. So, there's like an immediate adjustment period, but, even over time, like over years, they're still adjusting to all the different scenarios or situations that they may be in, where they're faced with the decision between, having a cupcake at a birthday party or not having a cupcake at a birthday party. Which I'll kind of touch on in a little bit. But keeping the conversations light and at a very high level when you first start talking to your kiddo about this, I think is important. I don't think it's necessary to go into a lot of the details with, say, a 4-year-old, or even some older kids. You don't need to go into that much detail with them. Just talk about it in general terms, like, hey, I'm realizing that the way that I've been eating all my life has been hurting animals to some degree, and I didn't realize that I was doing that, and I don't want to hurt animals anymore. So I want to try to eat these other foods that I know won't hurt animals, and they're going to make me healthier too. And I think there's some other, there's a couple of books that my family's bought that I think have helped, especially my second born, Evan, who's 5 now, understand the impact of the choices that we're making. There's a couple of books. One is V is for Vegan, and by the same author, there's another book that's called That's Why We Don't Eat Animals, both of which I think are great depending on the age of your kiddo. V is for Vegan, I think, is a little bit more appropriate for younger kids, and That's Why We Don't Eat Animals is for older kids, say 5 to 10. It just goes into a little bit more of the details, so it may not be appropriate for somebody who's younger. But Ruby Roth is the author of these books, I believe, and I'll provide some links in the show notes of this episode at plantbaseddietbenefits.com/13, where you can, link over to Amazon to look at these books. I think it's a great idea to at least get the V is for Vegan book. It's a great introductory book about why you're choosing a vegan or plant-based path, and is a good conversation starter with your kids, because as you're reading the book, they may just naturally have questions that come up, and you're going to be there to help answer those questions. That was some pretty high level stuff, but I do want to get into a little bit more around how we approached it. We put a lot of thought into it, and one of the things that really stuck with me was, and I was really struggling with, was how can I switch to a plant-based diet and then all of a sudden kind of force my kids to eat a certain way. A lot of parents may see another parent raising their kids plant-based and think, well, man, that's not fair. You're not allowing them the option to eat other foods. And one of the things that I realized was that before I went plant-based, I was pretty much forcing my kids to eat the way we used to eat. There's no different, right? As a parent, I'm the one that buys the groceries and prepares the meals. My kids never really got involved with that. So it really was no different once I went plant-based. I'm still the one making the decision about what foods I think are best for my kids. And once I kind of realized that, that really helped me, kind of accept the decision or be okay with the fact that, I'm controlling the food that they eat. But one of the things that we really wanted to help our kids learn the benefits of this diet and kind of make the choice for themselves, that this is what they want to do after they move out of the house, is we wanted to give them the independence of making their own choices outside of our house. So, whenever we are home, the food that is in our house is plant-based. And, we never bring animal-based products into our home. But when we are out at a restaurant, or maybe they're going to a birthday party or something of that nature, then we allow them to make their own choices. Now, our kids, even before we went plant-based, when we went plant-based at the time, we just had 2 kiddos, James and Evan. And at the time, they were ages 4 and 2, I think. And they never really liked meat. They didn't really care for chicken or fish or any other, like actual animal flesh. So after we went plant-based and they went over to a friend's house, or a family member's house, or we went out to dinner, they never picked the animal protein. So that was never really an issue for them. But giving them that choice that, when they're out to a restaurant, they can have dairy-based macaroni and cheese. Or they could have cheese on their beans if they wanted it. Or they can have the cupcake at the birthday party. Or the cheese pizza at the end of season baseball celebration, which is pretty typical or traditional. Giving them those choices where, they can go into that type of environment and not be forced to eat a certain way or be told that they can't have the cheese pizza because it has an animal-based cheese on it, I think has really benefited us. And you'll learn about that a little bit more. I actually kind of interviewed my 2 oldest kids and asked them some questions, and I think it'll be great for me to kind of read off what some of their responses were towards the end. But giving them that independence was really huge for us. I think it allows them to start making decisions at a young age. So that way, by the time they do move out of the house, they already know what's best for them in terms of their health and their impact on the planet. Now, one of the things that we do when we do go over to a birthday party or something like that is we'll oftentimes prepare our kids and let them know that, hey, remember the cake that they're going to have is probably, has eggs or something else in it from an animal. So, be aware and make that decision on your own. But if for some reason you don't want the cupcake, then, remember, we'll bring over some, another treat. We'll bring over some Oreo cookies or something like that for them to have as an alternative. That's something that's really worked well for us because they can still have, some candy or something like that is plant-based and skip on the animal-based products. So it just, again, enables them and gives them that choice. That way they're left with still being able to get something as opposed to having the option of cake or nothing. Now, when it came to the food, when we first went plant-based, I think one of the best things that you can do is just try to convert over some of your family favorites over to a plant-based version. So having things like lasagna, for example, you can make it plant-based and use things like tofu instead of ricotta. And it tastes fantastic. You don't really notice much of a difference there. Keeping things simple, I think, is really important. Don't try to overly season things. Or at least my kids haven't liked things that are overly seasoned. They like things relatively plain, and they normally prefer to have their food kind of separated, as opposed to being all mixed together. So keeping things simple has really helped us out. Maybe your kids don't mind the complexity, but that's something that you'll have to kind of test out. And then I think getting them in the kitchen and involved in meal planning really helped our kiddos too. So whenever they're in the kitchen making the meal, they're probably 10 times more likely to completely devour the meal when it comes time to eating it. It's just like they're a little bit more committed to the meal. And then also with meal planning, like when we sit down every weekend to talk about what meals we're going to have during the week, anytime we bring them into that process, which is not something we do every week, but whenever we do, they have a elevated level of excitement over the meals that they're going to have that week, and they do a really good job eating them. But if you're really stuck for ideas in terms of family friendly recipes, there is one cookbook, and I'll provide a link for this book in the show notes page as well. But there's a book by Drina Burton called Plant Powered Families that has worked out really well for us. It's probably the dirtiest cookbook in our cupboard because of how many times we've used it, but they have some really good breakfast options, like muffins and banana bread and some different smoothies that our kids have really liked as breakfast or snacks. There's one called a Chunky Monkey, I believe, in that cookbook that our kids have almost every single morning for breakfast. They love it so much. And it's a great way to incorporate some greens, and I think we add flax seeds to it too, to provide some good omega-3 fatty acids for the kids too. So check out that cookbook if you haven't had success finding one yet. A lot of really good recipes in that one. Our kids have enjoyed it. Now, one of the things in particular that you talked about was the vegetables. That one can be tricky. Like I said, even for families that don't eat a plant-based diet, it can be tricky to incorporate veggies. But one thing that I think has really helped us out is trying to make the vegetables many different ways. If we take kale, for example, we've given it to them in raw form. We've just tried steaming it. We've tried, sauteing it with different flavors. We've tried just incorporating it into a meal, like adding kale to spaghetti or lasagna or something like that. We've tried a lot of different ways of incorporating it into their diet. And, for James, my oldest, who's 8 now, he likes to eat kale raw, which kind of surprised us, Like we were trying to cook it to make it a little bit more palatable, but he'll eat it raw. Now he doesn't eat like a whole plate full of kale, but, if we put a little bit of kale or, spinach, green, pretty much any of the greens, he likes them raw. So finding out what works for your kid is important. Our kids really like carrots and cucumbers, just cut up so that way they can like dip it into a sauce or something like that, or just eat it plain. Those are really good vegetables that our kids like. And, if they really hone in on 1 or 2 veggies that they like, or 3 or 4, then, just continue to expose them to those vegetables so they get their veggie intake in, and just over time introduce new ones. This approach we're taking is trying to provide them the best success over the long term, so that way when they move out of the house, they are adapted to eating this way, and over the years they're going to get more and more variety in their diet. We aren't trying to give them the same variety that we have in our diet right away. I think it's going to take some time to adapt their taste buds to some degree, and have them eating more variety in their diet. So those are some really high level stuff that we've done to incorporate this plant-based diet in with our kids. And I think reflecting back on this, I realize how long we've come to when we first went plant-based to now. I remember as I was talking to my kids about it tonight, my wife reminded me that when we first introduced the plant-based diet to them, we were replacing things like chicken or fish with tofu. And I was trying really hard to make tofu taste like chicken. I grew up on chicken, so, I was really wanting tofu to taste like chicken. And over time I realized that tofu tastes like tofu. and enjoy it for what it is. And now I'm a huge fan of tofu, and both of my older two boys absolutely love tofu. But Evan, at the time when he was only 2 or 3 years old, he didn't really want to try tofu. It was kind of funny, just and kind of reflecting back, he's never really liked trying new food, but once he tries it, he either likes it or he doesn't, and he'll continue to eat the stuff he likes. But my wife reminded me tonight that when we first started introducing him to tofu, we told him that it was like cheese. And once we told him it was like cheese, he just started devouring it up, and he thought it was the coolest thing. And if you guys know Evan, if any of my family or friends are listening tonight, he's kind of stubborn to a great degree. And he goes, "Well, I thought it was like cheese, so from now on, I'm not going to devour tofu anymore." So he pretty much, he was, I doubt he's being serious, but we'll have to see. Time will tell if he all of a sudden sidetracks and doesn't like tofu anymore, because we told him that we tricked him when he first started trying it. But we'll see how that pans out. But I want to now kind of pivot and talk to you guys a little bit about James and Evan and why they now have decided to eat this way. I think it kind of provides some proof as to the approach that we've taken, and at least so far it's working out. So we'll see how it goes over time. I'm not going to claim this is the best way to go, but it's worked well for us. And James, he's 8 years old now. When we first went plant-based, he was 4, and he's really changed in those 4 years in terms of his maturity and just being able to comprehend what the impact of his choices are. And when asking him why he eats the way that he does, the very first thing he said was that we are doing it in order to protect our Earth, which I thought is awesome. He doesn't totally understand the connection, I don't think, in terms of greenhouse gas emissions and yada yada. Like, you don't need them to understand that, but he understands that eating this way is good for our Earth. He also doesn't want to hurt animals. He's under the impression, that if we keep eating animals, then eventually there will be no more animals even available on our planet, which, of course, as an adult, we understand how factory farming works when it comes to the cows and chickens and all that, and they'll never run out of them. But, in his mind, there will be no more animals if we keep eating them, and that's a very sad thing for him. Of course, he just doesn't want to hurt animals, he says. And one of the things I really liked, and maybe communicate this with your kids, is he says that if we switch to a plant-based diet, then you might just find out that you like new food, which is really cool. So I talked a little bit earlier about how you may be taking foods away, but you're also introducing a whole new world of food out there. And I think he recognized that, which is really cool. When I was asking about some of his favorite foods, things he gets really excited about are tomatoes, oranges, and watermelon. Those are the 3 he mentioned, but I know he really likes strawberries and blueberries too. He's a big fan of pasta, like most kids, so vegan mac and cheese is a big favorite of his. He likes baked ziti and spaghetti and stuffed shells. And with the baked ziti and stuffed shells, we incorporate tofu into those as the cheese, so to speak. We're talking about breakfast a little bit. One of the ones that he likes is just a piece of bread with some peanut butter on it with some sliced banana, or that chunky monkey type of smoothie. There's also another smoothie in that Plant Powered Families book that is like an apple smoothie with apple cinnamon that I really like and they like too. One of the things I thought was really neat, and I'm kind of proud of it, because if you're raising kids that really think about their health and want to take care of their health to live long and be healthy. I think this was really cool, and he was saying in response to a question about what kind of advice would you give to another kid. What he was saying that, well, in order to be healthy, you may want to only have candy every once in a while. That way you aren't eating too much candy and getting sick. And I'm like, I think that's a great idea, James. But you might scare some kids off if you tell them that. If you go plant-based, you're not going to eat as much candy. But I think it's great because he has this awareness around what is healthy and what's not healthy. And he's able to kind of make that choice. Now it's October right now, so we'll see how that changes come Halloween. But I thought it was really neat. And, because I told him a little while ago, I told him the story about how parents want to take care of their kids and make sure that they're feeding them healthy food and maybe not allowing them to eat certain things. And I remember somebody else telling me this analogy about how if a kid were to get a pet rabbit, for example, ask the kid what they would feed the rabbit. And a lot of times kids are going to say that they'll feed the rabbit carrots and they'll feed the rabbit, other vegetables, and they'll eat the grass. And they just keep listing off all these natural foods that rabbits eat. And then as a parent, you could ask your kid, well, would you feed them Oreo cookies? Or would you feed them candy? Or would you feed them another animal? And a lot of the times the kids are like, well, no, of course not. That's not healthy for the rabbit. And then you say, well, son or daughter, you're like my rabbit. You're my kid. And I think it's important for me to, feed you healthy food. So I may not get as excited about giving you candy all the time because I know it's not healthy. And it's a really cool analogy. And I think that one in particular helped James kind of understand that, it's not good to just eat candy all the time as much as they may like it. Some other advice that he had for kids was, that in order to go plant-based, one of the reasons you do it is to help the animals and not hurt the earth. And he said, just leave the animals be. Let them enjoy their lives. And, when he's talking to other kids, he mentioned that if somebody asks him about why he eats a certain way, then he could just respond by saying that we're trying to eat as healthy as, or be as healthy as we can be. And not necessarily pass judgment on the other people. So if he sees other people eating animal-based products, he's not being judgmental on them, and not sparking that conversation either. And one of the things I was most proud about is we were asking about how we let them choose the food that they eat outside of our home. And we asked him if he enjoyed that, if that was something that he appreciated. And he sat there and he thought about it for a little bit. And he's like, it's kind of hard to explain. And he kind of thought some more. And he's like, I think it allows me to be more independent. And that way, when I grow up and I'm older, I'll know how to make the right choices when you're not around. And I was just floored by that response. Honestly, I can get emotional at times when, I try so hard at something and I can see the impact that it's making. And like I said, this is why we took the approach that we did of letting our kids make choices outside of our home. And our 8-year-old understands why we're doing it, which is really cool. Really cool. So that's what James had to say about eating a plant-based diet and why he does it. Going to talk a little bit about Evan too. He's quite a character, so I know I got a couple of laughs out of this one. Now Evan, he's 5 years old. He was around 2, I think, when we switched over to a plant-based diet. And when I asked him why he eats this way, he also mentioned that he doesn't want to hurt the animals, and that if we were to eat animals, then there'd be no more cows and no more horses. Which I kind of got to laugh at because, of course, like you can't buy horse meat at the store. They also talked about, like not having any more dogs and cats around, because they just, they aren't really exposed to what most families eat when it comes to, the options for which animals to eat, which I think is really, really cool. Now, this next one kind of made me laugh. He goes, why else maybe that you don't want to eat meat? And he said, I do it so that way there's no bones in my body. And it kind of took us off guard a little bit. It's like, well, I was just sitting there thinking, like, well, there is bones in your body. What does he mean by that? And basically, he doesn't want to eat any animals because animals have bones. And he didn't want to eat the bones from the animals and have those bones in his body, which I think is really cute because, like I said, he never really ate, chicken or fish before going, but he was at such a young age, he doesn't really remember that. So he's just completely oblivious to the fact that, people don't actually eat the bones from animals when they eat animals, but it was a cute response. He also says that he wants to be healthy, which is cool as a 5-year-old. Some of his favorite foods, banana. He loves bananas. Big fan of cucumbers and carrots as a snack as well. His mac and cheese obsession is there, just like any other kid his age, really. There's some store-bought mac and cheese that he really likes. It's very similar to like a Kraft mac and cheese, and he really likes that one. Big fan of the Chunky Monkeys or milkshakes for breakfast. He also likes bagels with cream cheese or peanut butter on it, crackers with peanut butter on it. Peanut butter is a staple in our house. I mean, I think, peanut butter and jelly most kids enjoy, and that's a very common lunch that we can send the kids off to school with. One of the questions that the member of our community had in particular was about protein requirements. And I think if you give your kids a well-balanced diet, they're going to get plenty of protein. It's not really something you have to worry about. But peanut butter and other nuts and things like rice and beans have plenty of protein in it. The tofu has plenty of protein in it. If you're loading them up on that kind of stuff, you're not going to have any issues with protein. Evan made a comment about the books really being helpful for him to understand why we eat the way that we do, which is pretty cool. He was a fan of the V is for Vegan book. Again, I'll link to that in the show notes as well. And just one thing I want to comment about Evan too is he's not completely on board, so to speak, like James is. So the vast majority of the time, James, when he goes to a birthday party or something like that, like he'll maybe half the time he'll decide not to have the cake, and half the time he will, for example. Evan, not so much. He's still at the point where, if he's at a birthday party, he wants the cupcake or the cake, or he'll still eat like the cheese pizza at a party, where James will have a veggie pizza with no cheese. So if the member of our community, you have a 4-year-old in particular, right? Like just give it some time. Cheese is a really difficult one for kids because it can be quite addictive. So while they're outside of the house, if they want to have a piece of cheese pizza, it's like, in my opinion, it's not the end of the world. I know I may get some feedback from like hardcore vegans on that one, but when I think about my kids on the spectrum of healthy diet to not healthy diet, they eat a diet that is so much more healthy than the typical standard American diet that most kids are eating nowadays. So I think that the benefit of giving my kids their independence and allowing them to make choices and see what works for them outweighs the minimal exposure that they have to dairy products. That's just our take on it. So there you have it. Just wanted to give you guys kind of their opinion on the plant-based diet and whether or not they enjoy it. And just to recap a little bit, I think it's really important as a parent, you make your approach unique to your family, just like you do with any other parenting aspects. You got to make choices with your kids and the situation that you're in to see what works best. I think it's important to start with familiar foods and then convert them into a plant-based version. And as best as you can, get them involved in the process, whether that's in the kitchen or with weekly meal prep. When it comes to introducing new foods, find out how they like it, and kind of preface it that way with the kids. We're going to have kale again tonight. Last time we had it steamed and you didn't like it, but I'm going to cook it a little bit different tonight and see if you like it that way. And, then maybe that's the way they really enjoy it. Allow them to make their own choices outside the home. I think that's really key. And again, I think they need their independence there, as opposed to just being so strict with them on the diet. I would highly recommend the books that I've talked about. So the books by Ruby Roth and Drina Burton. I'll link to those in the show notes. Again, that's at www.plantbaseddietbenefits.com/13. You'll be able to get all the links there. And lastly, but not least, this is really important. I think it's critical that you be patient with your kids. It's going to take time, and it's going to take a little bit of maturity on their end to really comprehend the impact of their actions, and try not to get frustrated with it. It's a two-way street, and I think if you yourself are getting frustrated because they haven't caught up to your decisions, just remember that as an adult, you may have just recently made the change to go plant-based, and it's going to take them a while to make that change and understand what's going on too. So you really have to be aware from a change management perspective that you need to get their buy-in. You need to let them understand why they're doing it in order to see the benefits. So thank you very much. I would like to thank a member of the community for submitting this question. You can learn more about our community at plantbaseddietbenefits.com/community. It's a Patreon community there where you can ask any questions that you have, may turn them into a podcast episode like I have done today, or just answer them right away in our community as well. I also want to let you all know that I'm going to be starting up some introductory calls where I can sit down one-on-one with you guys and help bring some awareness to you on the key questions or concerns that you have about the plant-based diet. So head on over to my website, again at our show notes page, plantbaseddietbenefits.com/13, where you can book some time to chat with me. As I mentioned at the very beginning of this episode, I am studying to become a health coach through the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. And one of the very first things that I'm going to be doing is just sitting down with you guys and talking about your health history, so to speak, and learning a little bit more about your story and how a plant-based diet, along with other lifestyle changes, could benefit you to becoming a healthier version of yourself. So I'd really like to start meeting with you guys. I'm not officially launching my health coaching practice, so to speak, but I do want to engage with you guys and learn where I can help you guys out the most, and also just see if I can bring some awareness to you guys around what your key concerns are and how to attack them going forward. So if you're interested in chatting one-on-one, head on over to my website. It would be great to chat with you and help you on your journey to better health. As a reminder, you may not have known this before, but our mission at Plant-Based Diet Benefits is to improve our world one healthy person at a time, and these health history type chats are one way to do that. So thank you very much for your time today, guys. I look forward to hearing from you soon.